Part of a long line of Soviet variable geometry aircraft in which only the outer wing panels were movable. This is an Su-17 M4. It was a standard Soviet ground attack fighter bomber of the 70s and 80s. A ground attack aircraft needs to have hard points under the wings to carry a variety of weapon loads. These hard points need to be fixed so they're always pointing straight ahead. In a full swing wing aircraft, fixed hard points under the wing would move when the wing moves. A complex mechanism has to be used to keep them parallel to the fuselage, no matter what angle of sweep the wing adopts. In the Su-17, Sukhoi were able to use their compromise approach to variable geometry to solve this problem. The hard points were simply mounted on the non-moving section of the wing. And the compromise approach itself worked. The Su-17 needed only half the takeoff distance of its fixed wing relatives. It could carry its weapon loads 30% farther and was capable of speeds beyond Mach 2. While Sukhoi's approach was effective, the rival MiG Bureau was about to move in a different direction. In the early 60s, they were facing the same problem as Sukhoi. They were searching for a way of getting good low-speed performance out of an aircraft capable of Mach 2. Instead of Sukhoi's compromise approach, they favored the full variable geometry planform that Sagi had developed from the American F-111. In 1965, Artyom Mikoyan, with the success of the MiG-15 and 21 behind him, was at the zenith of his power. His design bureau was facing the task of finding a successor to the MiG-21. The American F-4 Phantom could carry a far greater weapons load than the MiG-21. It could detect a target sooner and had the performance to accept or decline an engagement in battle as its pilot chose. Mikoyan's deputy and heir apparent in the MiG hierarchy was Rostislav Belyakov, who had been with the Bureau since 1941. He and Mikoyan took overall control of the development of the new fighter concept. One of the major factors of the new requirement was beyond visual range radar, to aim weapons before a target could be seen with the naked eye. Because it needed greater detection range than the standard MiG-21 radar, a larger dish had to be housed. More electronics had to be installed, which meant a larger aircraft with a greater cross-section. But it still had to fly at speeds up to Mach 2.35, and it still had to be able to use the same airfields as the MiG-21. A conservative approach was developed in parallel with the radical variable geometry approach. A MiG-21 was modified and fitted with a centrally mounted jet engine. It pointed downward and provided extra lift for takeoff and landing. A new delta wing prototype was fitted with the same system. Its NATO code name, Faithless, was appropriate. MiG itself had little faith in the design. The engines were only used in takeoff and landing. They occupied valuable space and reduced the aircraft's range. There was little doubt that the real solution was a genuine variable geometry aircraft. It came in the form of the MiG-23. The prototype of the MiG-23 was called the E-23I. I stands for the Russian word meaning variable. The prototype made its first public appearance at the Domodedovo Air Show in 1967. The wings were swept and unswept several times during the course of its demonstration flight and attracted a great deal of attention from Western observers. The MiG-23's range of wing sweep was very similar to the F-111's. At its straightest, it was swept back 17 degrees. This was the setting used for takeoff and landing. Most of the mission for which the MiG-23 was designed is carried out at subsonic speeds with the wings at a 45-degree angle. Only for a few minutes of a normal mission is the full supersonic flight sweep angle of 71 degrees called for. The 3 sweep positions were preset, and it took about 15 seconds to move from one to the other. The Menino Air Force Museum outside Moscow contains one of the world's largest collections of significant aircraft. Many of its more than 120 exhibits are prototypes. This is the E-23I, the prototype of the MiG-23. It is exhibited with its wings in the straight position. Next to it is another early MiG-23 with its wings fully swept back. The wings of the prototype were thin. They had full-length trailing edge flaps, but no ailerons. Lateral control was achieved by horizontal stabilators and spoiler surfaces on each wing. The spoilers operated independently. If one was raised, it created drag and reduced the lift of the wing, causing the aircraft to bank. The wings were mounted level with the top of the fuselage, which was quite flat from just behind the cockpit right back to the tail. The wing hinges were located in large swept shoulders well outside the fuselage. The cockpit canopy was flush with the fuselage top and had almost no view backwards. It was designed with great faith in air-to-air missiles and high supersonic speeds for air-to-air interceptions. This was no dogfighter. The drive of the wing sweep mechanism was hydromechanical. It was operated by 2 redundant systems acting together. If one failed, the time taken to move from one sweep position to the next was increased by half. This is the fully swept position of 71 degrees. The landing gear of the MiG-23 was unique. It was one of the most complex systems of 3-dimensional mechanics of any aircraft ever built. Each wheel had to be hidden in a fuselage of relatively small cross-section, but at the same time the track had to be wide enough to provide stability on rough airfields, and the need to work from unmade surfaces meant that a mudguard had to be incorporated into the design. The MiG-23 23I on display at Menino was the first of at least 10 prototypes. The first production MiG-23s had twice the jet thrust of the MiG-21. They weighed twice as much and carried twice as much fuel. The pilots also had to come to terms with the extra factor of manually changing the wing sweep during flight. Production MiG-23s were equipped with a KM-1 ejection seat, which could operate at speeds from 85 miles an hour on the ground to 745 miles an hour and an altitude of 75,000 feet. MiG-23 pilots didn't like the seat because it tended to cause back injuries. Some even preferred to crash land rather than eject. The chief designer of the MiG-23 was a former great MiG test pilot, Grigory Sedov, who test flew the MiG-15, 17, and 19. He says that the MiG-23 was the first true fighter with variable geometry to be produced anywhere in the world.